Thank you to Lost Island Press for allowing me to review an advanced reader copy of this book. This is my honest review of Lone Player by Julia Rosemary Turk. Overpopulation has almost led to the extinction of the world. Due to the lack of resources, wars, climate change, and many other devastations caused by this, people have suffered numerous losses around the world. To control the population, the government developed an annual event known as the Pick, where 2 playing cards are drawn from a deck on live television every new year. Citizens were marked with 2 cards on their wrists the moment they were born, and those with matching cards to the ones drawn by the presidency will all be exterminated. This was deemed as the fairest way to save humanity. Those who are set out to carry out the act of extermination are an elite group of soldiers known as the Chaser Corps. By choosing to become a chaser, a person may earn immunity for themselves and their families to be exempted from extermination. They will be spared from the punishment brought on by the Pick. Those who are fortunate enough may choose to pay for immunity, but for the rest, they are subjected to the same fate, a fair method that keeps everybody in check. But what happens when you grow up in this kind of world? A world where humans are taught to hate and trained to kill people like your best friend, who hides her chronic illness to avoid a death sentence. What if that person is your sister, whom you would do anything in your power to protect? In a world where everything is turned against her, what would you choose to do? What game would you choose to play? And what would you sacrifice to save the ones you love? In her debut novel, Lone Player, Julia Rosemary Turk explores the answers to these questions, filled with secrets and betrayals, challenges to one's morals and beliefs, and the battle between truth and deception. This first book in the trilogy is an epic ride from start to finish. We follow our 2 main characters, Lavender Eddie Vauquelin and Ren McClellan. The last thing Eddie wants to do is to meet her father's expectations and become a chaser. Her true desire is to become an illegal healer to save her best friend Margot, who is chronically ill, which is illegal in the society. She defies her father when she dodges the Chaser Corps entrance exam and aligns herself with the rebels, where one wrong move could have dire consequences. Margot's twin brother Ren, however, longs for something different. He wants to become a chaser in order to earn his family and his sister the immunity they need in order to protect Margot's life. He secretly decides to take the entrance exam, challenging his family's anti-chaser principles and plunging himself deeper into a moral crisis in the process. 2 different people with 2 completely different methods, but Eddie and Ren share one goal: save Margot. Though they have their own shared past and shared hatred toward each other, they must work together as they weave an intricate web of falsities to keep their families in the dark. But as they dive deeper into opposing sides, doubt threatens their fragile alliance. Will their bond prove strong enough to shatter the system, or will the weight of their lies turn them against each other? First of all, this book had me on the edge of my seat. The concept was intriguing and gripped my attention from just the synopsis alone. I was also in the middle of a reading slump when I picked this book up again, and it pulled me right out of it. Any book that destroys a reading slump is always a winner for me. As someone who's obsessed with dark dystopian fiction stories and the many themes that are present in the genre to explore, I was amazed by the world building and the history behind this dystopian government that commits so many atrocities just to be able to have control over its people. I loved learning more about the world, the characters live in, and how it came to be. History is one of my favorite parts about a dystopian novel, how things got to be where they are currently in the book. I will say that this was a mind-blowing book for a debut novel. It surprised me in so many ways I wasn't expecting. The author has an undeniable talent of writing such beautiful, intimate prose in between the characters' alternating perspectives. There were so many times when I laughed and ached for these characters as I grew to be so attached to them over the course of the novel. The internal struggles they face as they fight against their own moral codes in order to save the ones they love is something I truly admired. The blurry line between right and wrong was interesting to read about, and it's something I've always loved in books, especially dystopian fiction. There were instances where I myself as the reader was questioning what I would do if I were in their situation. There were many times when I couldn't really judge the characters' decisions because I wouldn't know what I would do if I were in their shoes. The author does a great job of putting things into perspective, leaving the reader questioning their own morals and beliefs alongside the characters. It really immerses you into the moral conflict the characters were experiencing. As much as I love these characters and the prose, I will say that I wasn't invested right away. The beginning chapters were especially hard to get through as they were quite long, and so were the other chapters in the book. I'm not a huge fan of reading long chapters, so it's probably just a preference thing, but it was hard for me to care about the characters because some scenes were just not holding my attention. Some scenes, in my opinion, were quite unnecessary and were drawn out with so many pages when they could have been summarized in only a few words. But despite that, as I kept reading, the chapters began to fly by so quickly because I became more invested towards the middle of the book. The conflict of the story was what caught my attention the most. Seeing Ren and Eddie work together and yet hating each other for other reasons gave their interactions so much tension and chemistry that I loved reading about. I love it when characters bounce off of one another in their dialogue, and it was realistic enough that I saw them as real people. Seeing their family and sibling dynamics was also captivating in their differences. You read as Eddie struggles to face her father's unconventional love and impossible expectations for her life, and we see her struggle to break free from that. It's probably the most essential part to her character as we see it mold her throughout the book's events. Between both of their perspectives, I think I liked Eddie the most. She's a likable character to me, and yet you love her for all her flaws. Even when she's lying to her family, you understand why she's doing it, and yet it pains you just as much as it pains her. At least for me, she was my favorite character. I also loved the bond she shared with Margot. You can see how much they care about each other. There was also a lot of information in this book about chronic Lyme disease and how it affects one of the characters, Margot. I'm grateful toward this book for making me more aware and knowledgeable about chronic illnesses and the importance of educating people more about their debilitating effects and symptoms and how it affects people mentally as well. It really opened my eyes and made me want to learn more. I was also entranced by Ren's character. I loved him and Margot's sibling dynamic, and watching him slowly start to not recognize himself anymore as he becomes a chaser to earn her immunity was agonizing to read about. You feel him start to lose himself as he starts to view himself as a monster programmed to kill. The conflict in this story was just chef's kiss. I loved it so much. You start to root for the characters, even when their dynamic changes towards the middle of the novel. The exploration of hate was also very interesting, and not just a hate to love, enemies to lovers romance. The act of learning and unlearning hatred and the actual question if there was really any hate to begin with was well executed in this book. Of course, this hate leads to all sorts of repression and violence within the system of this dystopian world, but exploring the hate between Eddie and Ren was also at the forefront of the story, which I loved seeing that dynamic. There were a few repetitive phrases and details that I think could have just been cut out of the story. Many things that we already knew about the characters were just referenced a few times again in other paragraphs, and it slowed the pace of the story for me. I did, however, absolutely love the side characters. Aaron has my entire heart. His interactions with Eddie were some of my favorite moments. The dialogue between them was done so well with so much heart and humor. Also, just a side note, I'm in love with Aaron's knife collection. I would love my own emotional support knife collection. Laurie was an amazing character too. Every side character we were introduced to, I grew so attached to them. Learning about their backstories was just so much fun. Except Duke, he can go drown in a lake. There was especially one particular scene with one particular cow field between two particular characters that really got me. The exchanges between Eddie and Ren were just so real and raw, and it tore my heart open. One of my favorite scenes. You really understand where they are both coming from and why they act the way they do. It was just one of those soft, delicate, intimate moments between the characters that I absolutely adored. I also loved how the characters were far from perfect and invincible. There were realistic obstacles in them achieving their goals and realistic outcomes and consequences of their actions. I was also shocked by the switch towards the middle portion of the book when something incredibly heartbreaking happened, but I think it was an authentic progression of the story nonetheless. even though it was absolutely emotional and gut-wrenching, and I will never forgive the author for ripping my heart out with that scene. There's also romance in the story, but it only felt like a small part of the novel. It really was only a small part of the novel. I wouldn't even say it's the focus of the overall plot, but it's there. I wasn't really a big fan of the romance between Eddie and Ren, as I didn't really feel chemistry between them as a couple. I think, to me, they just grew distant from each other over the course of the book, that by the end, when they finally confronted each other and were affectionate toward each other, I felt the tension, but there wasn't any chemistry. To me, they felt better off as friends than a couple, but that's just my opinion though. I did like how their connection wasn't repaired right away, and that they had to grow back together slowly over time, naturally, in order to learn how to trust each other again. It was realistic in that way, and I really appreciated that, because oftentimes in real life, whenever we have those kinds of relationships where they're broken down over time, it takes a while until it grows back together. These were just traumatized characters who are doing their best in terrible living conditions. You watch as their journey grows into a desire for change, a change for a world and a society where citizens don't have to live in fear for the rest of their lives, and people with disabilities and chronic illnesses are not punished because of it. Finally, we're at the ending. The ending just ripped me completely to shreds. It's been a while since I've read an ending that left me with absolutely no words. All I can say is that I'm very much looking forward to the sequel in this trilogy. In fact, I think I have a clip of the moment I finished it. Wait, here it is. So I just finished Lone Player. Ignore my face right now. Ignore my appearance, but I have no words. I have no words for this feeling. It's an ending that leaves you wanting more, but it also leaves you feeling empty. And it rips your heart to shreds. Like, I've grown to love these characters so much, and I don't want them to be in pain, but it's a need for survival, because I don't know if I can survive in a world without knowing the aftermath. Like, if you've read The Hunger Games and if you've read Catching Fire, then you know, and you felt the emotions of the ending of Catching Fire, then you probably know. You probably know an idea of what you'll be in store in this book. I think, to me, this book is like The Hunger Games, book 1 and book 2 smushed together. That's what it feels like. Like, if you just mush together The Hunger Games and Catching Fire in one book, I feel like you would get this one. But also, this book is completely different from The Hunger Games. It's so similar in many ways, but it's also its own thing. It's so, like, different and refreshing, but it's also everything that I love, everything that I know about the dystopian genre that I love. It's just everything familiar and everything, like, new all at once. It's like, it's a combination of so many things. When The Hunger Games came out, I feel like everyone was obsessed with it for a while and it kind of died out. But it's cool to see new ones appearing to this day, and I see a lot of interesting, unique concepts, and this one is one of them. So I really recommend this book. It is so... The end, I literally just finished the ending a second ago. I'm not okay. Like, every single time I go on Pinterest now, I see a quote that reminds me of the book. That's probably why you see those Pinterest quotes in this video, if you're watching this, because I can't help but add them in there because they remind me so much of the characters. It's like everything I see on Pinterest now, I can't get them out of my mind. These characters have lived in my mind for a while now. Yeah, highly recommend. Amazing debut novel, amazing. I think my favorite lesson/message that I got from this book is the idea that there are no quote-unquote right moments, which is a common misconception that all humans have and that I myself sometimes fall prey to. We all have this notion that there are proper times to say the right words, and that can be true to some extent, but we think we have all the time in the world to afford the luxury of a right moment, when maybe in reality, as it says in this book, there are no right moments. Especially when it truly matters. We always have to take advantage of the time we have now while we still have it. Humans will never be truly prepared or ready, no matter how many times we think we are. no one can be ready for anything, and the regular discussion about that concept in this book really struck me. It's actually really true that we always have to seize the now, just in case we won't have a later. Overall, this book made me happy, left me devastated, caused me to laugh, and tore me to shreds. It brought out so many emotions in me that I can't help but praise the author for doing that, because I really felt so many strong emotions while I was reading it. The complexity and beauty of these characters are some things readers can look forward to, as well as striking themes that will never leave the reader's mind. I can't recommend this book enough. If you're a fan of disturbingly dark dystopian books with heavy themes of moral conflict and uncovering the truth, this book is definitely for you. Thank you again to Lost Island Press for providing me with an art copy of Lone Player. All links to this book are in the description of this video.